Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Palace podcast, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network, which you just heard from that lovely intro. I am your host today, Dan Tanner, and I am joined by our lovely regulars on this podcast of Alex Wale. How are you doing, mate?
Hey Dan, yeah, all good, thanks, man. Just enjoying all the football that's going on at the moment. Just there's a lot, but it's the right amount. It feels like, especially with another international break coming up. I'm just trying to enjoy it as much as I can.
Yeah, well, it helps when we're actually winning for a change, so that always helps. We got international break, and then after Christmas we got the FA Cup run. So, which by the way, we had for the local listeners, we had Sutton on the telly last week on the weekend. Unfortunate to go out to Birmingham, but it's the FA Cup first round, so good luck on them. And we're also joined today with Wale Bakari. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Dan. I'm fine, Alex. Great to be on the pod tonight. Gearing up for some interesting games in the Champions League tonight, by the way. Really, I'm really not sure which one I'm saying. There's the Madrid-Milan game, and then there's Liverpool-Bayer Leverkusen. There's a couple of other good games, actually. Maybe UEFA was right about their plans for the Champions League. Just maybe.
Yeah, the Liverpool Leverkusen one could be interesting because that's a Xavi's club, isn't it? Alonso, your old player, and especially Leverkusen did really well last year. So undefeated bar one, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was just the Europa League final. Yeah.
So yeah, they could be fun. But carrying on from that, we are going to be talking everything football as always. So in today's episode, we are going to talk about are football stats getting a little bit convoluted and a little bit silly, as it was discovered, or somewhat, during the Sky Sports report the other day, that Mataeta is the highest shot conversion player in the Premier League in the last decade. So we're going to have a little chat on that. I'll get to how that actually works out later. And on that same vein, the criticisms of some of our players, particularly the attacking quartet, are those criticisms warranted, or are they just being sort of overblown out of proportion? And to finish up, we're going to be talking about the rumoured sale of Textor's stock at Palace. Will he be finally leaving and getting out of Palace, because apparently he doesn't want to be here? So this might make it easier for him. So to start off with, as I mentioned earlier, Mataeta is the most efficient shot converter in the Premier League over the last decade, with a 34.8% success rate. How this is calculated is supposedly over the last 12 seasons with a minimum of 10 goals and 30 appearances. That's how that works out. And just to put that into context, the next one on the list is Yaya Toure. So do we think there are football stats that are getting a little bit silly, a little bit convoluted, or are they just trying to fill up spots on the pre-match and the post-match interviews? Alex, let's start with you. What do you think of some of these football stats?
So first of all, Dan, I think the stat you mentioned is quite impressive from Mataeta.
I'm not taking anything away from Mataeta, but I just think it's the way they're calculated is so weird.
It is, and I don't know whether, like, in the last 10 years, there's been some amazing strikers, right? Like Aguero, Mo Salah. These guys are just absolute world-class players. And then to have Mataeta sneak in with this stat is it's really strange. Like, he's a good striker, but you can't put him in the same bracket as those kind of players. No statistic could make him as good as those guys. So yeah, I think you do have to take these stats with a pinch of salt. Like, they are part of the modern game, and obviously teams use them, pundits use them. Like Match of the Day is now stacked with statistics. Even when you're watching the highlights, they bring them up. For me personally, I find some of them just a bit pointless. Like, for instance, like running stats. Like, I don't really care if someone's covered 7 kilometers in a match. Like, you can tell if someone's doing the work or not just by watching a game, right? So some of it is a bit pointless, I find. But on the other hand, I don't mind things like XG. I think that's quite a good stat to use. I think that shows like generally the balance of play, which is quite good. But yeah, like I'm sort of in the middle, I would say. Like some of it is too much, and I don't think necessarily have a place. Whereas others, or I think some of them are like better used for the clubs rather than the fans, right? And then others I do find quite interesting. Just on that, the shot conversion rate, I actually had a look at last season's, and you guys can maybe have a guess. So another Palace player was 6th in the chart for last season's shot conversion rate. Do you want to have a guess who it was?
Conversion rate, so converting.
Jeffrey Schlupp.
Yeah, you've seen the table, haven't you, Wale? That's cheating.
No, I haven't. I just know it has to be something very ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it was Jeffrey Schlupp. Yeah, he was 6th. Yeah, he scored 2 goals, and I think he had like 37% conversion rate, which, yeah. And then second on the list was Ben White from Arsenal. So if you think stats have got out of hand, there's your evidence right there, I would say.
Yeah, they're just. Oh, I think they are getting very, very silly now. They've been very, very Americanized. Sort of the things that they will bring up, and it's just some of the ones in America are really, really weird. Like they brought up, I think, one stat of like how many kids certain quarterbacks have had, and like, does that? No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter in the slightest. So, Wale, do you have any views on the overuse of stats or underuse, depending on which side of the fence you want to go on?
Well, first of all, to be honest, it's not just football. It's in a lot of aspects of life these days. Stats everywhere. People comparing. How much social media is used in countries, how much money is made. Even in many workplaces now, there's a lot of interesting stats. Coming out, how many hours you spend at work, what do you do, and then there's always questions about the quality of the work. So unfortunately you might not find that in the numbers sometimes, but then that has always been there's always been the fight between qualitative and quantitative analysis. Yeah, at the moment there's a lot of quantitative analysis going on in football, a lot of numbers being put against each other. Alex was just mentioning the Jeffrey Schlupp thing. I just knew it had to be something very ridiculous. Maybe he had 5 shots all season, scored 3 goals, and then is the best striker. But we know who the best striker is. So, yeah, there's quite a number of, if you weigh it and say, as stats done, more good than bad, you would argue maybe it's done more good. I'm sure the clubs are using it as good education for the club, the managers, even the players. You can kind of measure where your weakness is, where you convert your chances most, where you need to work on. Although if you talk to some footballers, they'll tell you, there's so many things, because I always say that there's a lot of things that need to align. For example, when you look at a striker, there's so many things that needs to align, to bury a chance. I was watching the Liverpool-Brighton game the other day, and Mo Salah was one-on-one with the goalkeeper. 9 times out of 10 is burying that. But no, it didn't. But then it's got the more difficult chance. I don't know, so many players, miss the easiest chance but score the more difficult chances. So it just rubbishes stats at those moments. But it's very important. It's proved to be a very important tool for clubs and for players and for businesses, and and the media particularly have widened the content base, so to speak. There's more to talk about now. you watch a lot of sports programs. You guys talk about the American sports programs, that they're the worst, honestly. And they just bring up anything, and some of them you find interesting. To be honest, I use some of the things I see on FPL stats for my fantasy Premier League, and then some weekends I'm like, who told me to pick these players? Who came up with these numbers? But then sometimes you just get it right. So they will guide you, but it won't definitely tell you what to expect. However, it gives you a better chance, at understanding what to expect. And that's just what it has been, not just in football, in many aspects of life. But there's so many things these days that you understand better when you put numbers together. Sometimes you will, of course, naturally, you will hear ridiculous stats come up sometimes. There was a lot said the other week about, was it Mickey van der Ven, how he was maybe the fastest in the Premier League. I'm sure he knows he's not the fastest in the Premier League, So these are all sorts of things. So many things have been said about Kyle Walker. We saw him against Adama Traore the other day, So there are times when you just feel maybe the stats don't tell the whole story, but then they do tell the whole story. Sometimes it's quite ridiculous sometimes, but it's been a great addition to football and many aspects of life, to be honest.
That was a very, very well put together argument there. Yeah. Very much the same kind of thing. All these stats are useful. They put numbers, make things put into like succinct circles and sort of succinct ideas and stuff, and you can actually prove it. I think they're really good for the training and the analysis for sort of like scouting purposes or whatever. But I think some of them, like the ones we're bringing up here that brought up this, the intention for Mataeta here, I think some of them are just a little bit convoluted and are just there to either fill up some very vague spot somewhere to either answer a question that nobody actually asked. Because we know, as we say, like Mataeta is a good centre forward. Like, you're not going to have a problem with him. But Haaland is one of the world's best players, and he's like fourth on the list. And it's like, what? These stats don't tell the whole story. They are good for very, very small bits of history or bits of sort of information at a very particular time. But I think we're all largely in agreement that they do have their uses, but I think some of them are kind of convoluted and don't need to be around. So on that note, we're going to take a quick break just to thank the lovely people at Zencaster that allow us to do these podcasts on a daily basis. Here at Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencaster came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, and it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link below in the description to learn more about Zencaster. Alright, and we are back. So on that note of talking about statistics, etc., and one of them being our great centre forward, we are now going to talk about some of the criticism of our attacking players warranted, as over the last couple of weeks, players like Nketiah, Eze, Sarr have had a bit of stick thrown at them for not being as sort of effective or as efficient as they could be. So, do we think this is warranted? Or is it just being overreactive and that it's just journalists being journalists, really? Wale, what do you think?
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go back to stats. When you put the numbers side by side, 10 games into the season, 8 goals. Interestingly, last season after 10 games, Palace had 8 goals as well. And last season, before Roy Hodgson left, was was said to have been, a poor outing for the team. So do we say on the basis of that, I think the forward line have been poor this season as well? Maybe yes. But then you also look at the options available last season and you look at the options available this season. Yes, Olise left, but then you could argue there's more numbers up front. Mataeta and Ketia, Eze, there's Daichi Kamada, there's, maybe there's more numbers up front. So maybe when you look at it from that basis as well, you might end up saying maybe that they've not been fantastic this season. But, Southampton are the only team that have scored fewer than Crystal Palace this season with 7. And that's not company that you want to keep. So maybe, just maybe, you could argue that the criticism is understandable. Is it warranted this early in the season? I'm not entirely sure. I totally understand. Fans expecting goals. That's the reason. For watching football. A lot is made about teams defending well, playing well without the ball, avoiding unnecessary goals. But if you score the most of the goals, you will most likely win the games anyway. So fans go to the stadium to watch great attacking play and great goals being scored. So Palace forward line maybe haven't delivered, what is expected at that level. So maybe the criticism is a bit understandable. But I will say, as I've said, well, it's still very early in the season, although we're gradually getting to that part where you might not be able to say it's still early in the season anymore. There's been some improvement in the team. 2 goals against Aston Villa, 2 goals against Wolverhampton Wanderers, 1 against Tottenham. That's 5 in 3 games. When you do the stats, that's great. That's a great return compared to what we've seen. So maybe, just maybe, things are improving. And as I said earlier, you need so many things to align, for your team to really play well. Just when the team is getting in the groove, injury comes into play. Just when the one player is getting fit, another is getting injured, and we see that with a lot of teams. And it's just it tells you how difficult the job is for managers and for the backroom staff. So it's a very difficult job for these players. I really think that they will eventually get better. Palace last season, I think finished. I think about 7th or thereabout in terms of goals scored in the league, with I think 48 or 49 goals they scored. So I think the goals will come eventually. Remember also players like Nketiah, joined towards the very end of the transfer window, didn't have a preseason with these players. Things. Then there was the international break after, so it's been a bit of a stop for some of these players. I'm sure they will gel eventually. The goals will start flowing more as Palace fans expect eventually.
Yeah, I probably agree with that. Mostly they are humans, so there's only so much criticism that they can take, and it's still early. So yeah, there is still time for them to get back into it. But attackers, you are kind of judged on your scoring and your sort of attacking abilities. So if you're not doing it, you're going to get criticised, and then you're going to get benched. This is how it's worked and will work forever. So I think they are kind of warranted, but it's game by game would be appreciated a little bit more. That's kind of what I've been going on the basis of. You got any thoughts on the criticism of some of the Palace players, and if you're sort of comfortable with the way that we're playing at the moment? Because I know we've got some relatively sort of simple games coming up with Fulham, Ipswich and Villa again over the next couple of weeks, but we do have like Brighton, Liverpool and City like coming over the hill in December. So yeah, this is going to be a fun winter.
Yeah, I think the upcoming games, I think we'll have to stick with the system that we played the last few games. Glasner's obviously got a bit of a tune out of the team. I think the main thing that was going wrong was the pressing intensity, which we didn't see in the first few games, and that obviously cost us. But the last few games, that's been amazing. just the intensity of it has been excellent. And I think that's the difference. And when you play a Fulham at home and an Ipswich, perhaps even Brighton to an extent, you need to use that as much as you can and put players under pressure. It worked against Spurs terrifically well, and Aston Villa away. Two really the toughest games you're going to play this season. I don't know whether you could actually use it against City, for example, because they'll just pop the ball around you so easily.
Oh yeah, they'll just go, nope, we're not having any of that.
Yeah, it's a disaster waiting to happen. So I think Glasner does need a plan B, whatever that is. I don't know. But I think the 3-4-3 system that he's using is working. Just quickly on the attackers as well, like we've had a game and a half roughly now without Eze and scored 3 goals. So it's just funny really that our best player is out and we're scoring more goals without him. And I think that's something that perhaps has to be addressed by Glasner. Like, are we relying too much on Eze for the build-up play? Is he slowing the game down? I'm not singling him out for criticism because he has been one of our best players, but it's just an interesting observation. Like, there are different ways to win a football match without your star player on the pitch, and Palace historically rely on star players to get over the line. Obviously Wilf, and then Eze, then Elise. So is it now time to perhaps think of different ways of trying to win football games?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That we've done that for years, having 1 or 2 star players and being very reliant on them. Yeah, cause we've Wolf being one, and we had, like, back in the day we had sort of Andy Johnson. Only he scored the goals, etc., etc. So if we can it is a team sport, and the other guys are going to have it's not just a one-man army. So if Eze maybe just, I don't know, passes a ball off here and there, or Nketiah sort of holds it up, or dummies for somebody else, etc., things like that go a long way. But as I was saying earlier, sort of attackers are sort of judged by how many goals they score and how consistently they do it. So the same way that goalies will get criticised for giving up a goal or sort of not keeping clean sheets, but the difference is attackers they can affect how they score it and things like that. So they have a little bit more of a masters of their own destiny kind of thing. So criticism is always going to be there. If you do something wrong, somebody's going to criticise it. It is the 2020s after all. So there's not much you can really do about it except for, I don't know, score a couple of hat tricks. That might shut a few people up. Right, on that, we will take another quick break to thank our lovely network. And then we'll come back and talk about these rumours of Textor possibly selling his share of Palace, and we might be getting a new cash injection. So back in a second. This podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network. Every club, every day. And so we move on to our last section. Is Textor finally leaving Palace? So on the weekend, there was a very, very tenuous rumour that there has been a bid, or there is at least a few interested parties to get shares into Palace. And as Textor earlier in the season wanted to get rid of them to get into the Everton board, his ones seem to be the prime target. So what do we think of these particular rumours and the potential owners that we have that are coming in? Because depending on which paper or which website you look at, they seem to be slightly different. Alex, as you are the Palace fan here, let's go with you first. What are you thinking of?
Well, first of all, I think it's the quicker Textor gets out, the better, really. I mean, he's been great for us in terms of financing us the last couple of years, but it's obviously not worked out, mainly through his own doing of trying to do too much with other clubs as well, and not having as much of an interest in Palace. So yeah, the quicker he's gone, the better from my point of view. But we've got a couple of interested parties, which is good news, which means we're obviously an attractive club. I think any team in the Premier League is, really. So I think if Textor goes, we won't really feel a big financial hole, because the valuation is looking around 200 million. That's what Textor's shares will cost. So whoever's going to buy that isn't going to be short of money. So we're not going to have any kind of financial pitfalls. But yeah, I think, to be honest, like, whoever comes in will have to adapt to kind of Parish's way of running the club, because it's an odd system where he has the least sharehold, but he is the majority decision maker, which for us as a club is fantastic, because he is a fan of the club. But it just depends, like, maybe it's someone who's a bit less volatile than Textor comes in, and that would obviously suit us really well. But yeah, I've seen some weird rumours about some guy who owns something similar to Deliveroo in America is interested in us. Can't remember his name, but yeah, you're always going to get these weird things. When Simon Jordan sold his shares, I remember the under fire P. Diddy was interested in buying Palace, which I think was just a rumour at the time. But
yeah, I think it probably was a rumour, but probably a lot of stuff around there was.
Yeah,
this is the early 2000s, so it's like, we're just going to make stuff up and see what works.
You're always going to get these things when a part of a club is for sale, especially a Premier League club. So until something's over the line, it's all speculation, and the 200 million price tag is just gonna add to that, really, I think.
Yeah, because I've seen some evaluations anywhere between the 200 and 230, because I think the evaluation of the club was about 500 million, something like that. So then you vaguely work out that tax is 45, so 200 to 230 is probably seems to be the benchmark at the moment. And the potential new owners are varying from a food delivery entrepreneur, billionaire, delivery entrepreneur, there you go, and two investors with the Sky Banks investment group are also part or one of these ones. And I think the news reports seem to say that one of these ones are Palace fans, so which is a bit of a boast. I'm not really that bothered if they're a Palace fan or not. It helps that you can get on board and you'll be a little bit more sort of passionate about it and want the club to succeed, not just for the money. But personally, I'm not that bothered if they're a fan or not. If they've got the money and they can actually keep it going, I'm happy. Wale, you got any thoughts on this or any other news on any of these potential bidders?
Well, just as you guys said, there's a lot of stories been mentioned. There's a lot of names that I've mentioned, but the Sports Bank Group, of course, is one that was mentioned a couple of days ago. And one of the very interesting things is that it was mentioned that the group is actually quite very upbeat about working with Steve Parish. They say they love how he runs the club, and they're looking at they're very happy to work with him. The good thing is there is a willing seller in Textor. It's a question of someone meeting his valuation. It feels like a situation of sooner rather than later it will happen. It's just going to try as much as possible to get the most out of his shares. There's been, just as you mentioned, figures from 200 million to 250 million. The expectation is once the club is sold, it would then leave the value of the club at around 500 million pounds or thereabout. But for some reason, Textor, I'm sure he understands that after his flirtations with Everton during the summer, there was a very slim chance that it would be forgiven at Palace. And although you look at it and you think, well, maybe it's just business for him, but for a lot of clubs, the fans expect more than just business. They expect some level of loyalty. Yes, is putting some money into the club has made things a bit better in terms of there was the improvement in the stadium, and then some of the purchases that Palace have made, but fans expect some level of loyalty, and for Textor, it's just about the business for him, and he's got plans of getting into another club. The Everton deal, of course, Everton agreed a deal with another group, although I don't think that has been ratified by the Premier League yet, but it doesn't look like the Everton deal is gone for him. He's looking at other clubs, but it's just a matter of time, definitely, before he agrees a deal with one group or the other, and sell his shares at Palace.
I've been sort of, once this news broke, been sort of little bits have come out. Apparently, with the sale of the finances from this sale, I think he's looking into getting Watford. So that could be interesting. Just go a little down to Watford and take up that position, get them a little bit financially secure, because they've always been in and around being fairly sort of secure and all right. They just need to get that next step to get back into the Prem, I think, is what they're after. But yeah, we're very much on agreement that we have no ill will against Textor per se. Just he wants to leave, so fine. No real issue here. So with that, I think that's not a bad place to wrap up this evening. So want to thank Alex for turning up today.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure as always.
And Wale, I want to thank you again for showing up tonight.
Well, always, guys. Always nice, talking Palace with you guys.
And and want to thank the listeners out there that are continuing to listen to our nonsense. If you could give us a 5-star and just keep on the Twitter, keep on the YouTube, which we now are up on YouTube now. So this full podcast, completely uninterrupted, will go up probably at the same time as the podcast on Spotify. So until the next time, we'll see you again.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.